Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Kendra Heaney. I am the project lead of education here at Global Schools. Welcome to our new advocates in training. If you are joining us and you're working on the training right now, this is your first professional development session with Global Schools. So we are thrilled to have you join us. We're going to get started in just a moment. I do see quite a few people still in the waiting room. So while we're waiting for a few more people to join, we have a bit of a thing that we like to do here at Global Schools where we ask you to put your name and the country that you are joining us from in the chat. I am joining you all today from just outside Toronto, Canada. So greetings from Canada, and I look forward to seeing where everyone else is joining us from. See Azerbaijan, Turkey, US. Incredible. Such a global program here at Global Schools. Uganda, Dominican Republic, Morocco, Saudi Arabia. Incredible. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just a few announcements, and then I will turn it over to our guest speaker. Patricia, maybe while I'm doing the announcements, just if you can keep a chat on the waiting room and admit anybody in. Okay, so for our new advocates, sorry, I'm also going to just ask that everybody keep their mic on mute throughout the session today. Okay, so for our new advocates, welcome again. This is your first professional development session with Global Schools. Each month we'll be having about 1 to 2 sessions for you so that we hope that you join in. If you are a new advocate and you were doing the edX training, the training technically did close or complete last night. However, if you still have 1 or 2 modules left, please wrap that up today, as tomorrow we will be officially closing the training and preparing for the onboarding. If you did the WhatsApp training, the training does officially close tomorrow, and that is when your discussion essays are due. So please ensure that you are submitting your discussion essays by tomorrow, end of day. And just to note that any submission used with AI will not be accepted. We will be having our onboarding call on August 30th at this time, 2 p.m. UTC. So please stay tuned for more information. And we will be sharing that information with you this upcoming week. For our graduating advocates who had their graduation ceremony last weekend, I just want to say a huge congratulations once again to all of you. Great work on your 6-month mandate. If you did just graduate and you mentioned that you did not want to extend your mandate but have since changed your mind, please do reach out to us at advocates@globalschoolsprogram.org, because if you don't, we will soon be taking you off of our mailing list. For our alumni, so for those of you who just graduated or for those of you who have graduated from a previous cohorts, we did just send out within the last half an hour your applications to be a mentor. So please do check your emails if you are interested in being a Global Schools mentor. For mentors who just graduated from the previous cohort, your mentor certificates have been sent out yesterday, I do believe. We will be having an alumni coffee house on August 30th. So please do stay tuned for that. We will be sharing more information with you in the coming days. If you were not a graduating advocate or mentor, but are an alumni, your next key performance indicator or KPI will be sent out on August 20th and will be due on August 27th. Graduating advocates and mentors, because you've been doing lots of surveys over the last month, for wrapping up the previous cohort, you will not have to submit this KPI. And so your next KPI will be in November. Okay, so that is all of the announcements. I'm going to just quickly introduce our speaker, and then I will turn it over to Patricia. So I'm thrilled to welcome Patricia Bergstrom. Patricia is a project officer, alumni relations on the education team of Global Schools. She has led many professional development sessions for us over the past few years, and they have all been incredible. So I'm very excited for this session because I think it is a very important topic for all of our advocates. So Patricia, sorry, just give me 1 second for your bio. Oh, sorry, I must have just closed it there.
That's okay.
Okay, Patricia, I closed the tab, but I will turn it over to you. I think your first slide is you anyway, so maybe you can just give the group a bit of an introduction. Again, a huge welcome to Patricia. So thrilled to have you with us. So Patricia, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kendra. So yes, a lot of you know me already as the project officer in Global Schools. Those of you who aren't part of Global Schools, welcome as well. I just wanted to give a little notice there. The coffee house chat is actually on the 31st, not on the 30th. We have the onboarding on the 30th, just you know, in case. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here for a minute. Hang on a minute. Technology today is not really wanting to do. Here we go. Okay, can you see that, everyone? I hope you can.
Yeah, Patry, we're good. And just
Okay,
one more,
great.
sorry, one small more announcement before Patricia begins. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please do feel free to pop them in the chat. And over to you, Patry.
Okay, so while I'm presenting, I won't be able to see you people. So please do nudge me if there's anything that I need to listen to. Okay, so Kendra, if you could be my eyes and ears, that would
Did
be
you turn off your camera? We just see the background at the moment.
No, I shouldn't have. Okay. Hang on. Wait a second. Let me.
Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties. Bear with us for
Yeah, a
one
little
moment.
bit. My computer is doing very strange things. So here, have me without the background, and I'll
Perfect.
share
Good.
again. Okay, is that okay? So let me just share and see if you can see what I'm sharing again here. Okay, give me a second. My computer is doing silly things, so if you just give me a moment, I will sort this out again.
While we're waiting for Patry, please do feel free to, if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, please feel free to put your name and where you're joining us from.
Sorry for this. There we go. And we have cultural differences with our computers now and again as well. Okay, can you see that?
We're good, Patry.
Good, excellent. Okay, so welcome to this session on cultural bridges for effective communication in global settings. It's a subject that I feel very strongly about. So we're going to be exploring it in a very short time because it is obviously a huge, huge topic. So we're going to be doing some things to hopefully give you a little insight into how important it is with cultural awareness for communication in global settings. And also, I'm going to share with you a little, I think, quite useful way of remembering what to do when we're dealing with different global settings. So, as we can see in the chat, we are all from different places. And here's a bit about me and my personal experience with cultural differences, because I happen to have had a first-hand experience with cultural differences. I am of Swedish origin. My parents were Swedish, but I grew up in Spain, but not on the mainland Spain. I grew up in the Canary Islands. So I live on Gran Canaria, off the coast of Morocco, off the coast of Africa. So a completely different cultural surrounding, then Sweden, definitely. And while I was younger, I also went to British school. So as I grew up, I had three parallel communities in a way around me. So that also gave me the huge advantage of being trilingual, which is great. And it does really make communication a little bit easier in these things. So you can imagine that Sweden, that's up in the very north of Europe and Scandinavia, and Spain in the south of Europe, and the Canary Islands that are the very, very, very southern tip of Europe, have a lot of differences. And then if you add in a British school, if you've already had to do with the UK or with Britain in any way, you know that there are certain particularities as well that come from there. So we all have our particularities everywhere we are. So we're going to do very, very, very quickly just a 1-minute cultural awareness activity. Okay? I want you to just in the chat, just quickly write down how do you greet people in your country or in your community. So just very quickly, you don't have to go into like a major dissertation here, but how do you greet people? Like, for example, here in the Canary Islands, people greet each other with 2 kisses, yeah? 2 kisses on the cheeks. So that's the way that you greet people here. However, in Sweden, you greet people with a handshake. So just share your thoughts for a minute. I'm going to time the minute. And Kendra, if you could kindly just tell me what things are being said, that would be really, really, really useful.
We have, let's see. We have a namaste, a good morning. We shake hands and say hello. Different languages of how they say hello, like for example, salam in Azerbaijan, a wave hello, shake hands, hug, 3 kisses, handshake, prayer hands and bowing of the head, a smile, a handshake, shaking hand, lots of handshakes, folding our hands near our chest. So I guess in the prayer position, saying hello and a smile. So yeah, I think there's nothing new being added, Patricia.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So as you can see, yeah, there's like lots of differences. And we're only in this little community here right now with, I don't know exactly how many we are right now, but last time I looked, it was 60 something or other. And so in a community online, in a Zoom meeting, we already have at least 3, 4, 5 different ways of greeting each other. So if we have a look at the Global Schools Network, we can see that there's global schools and people, advocates all over the world. So the ways that people greet in all these places can be really quite different. If we go over a little continents overview, okay, just a general one, we can see that, you know, in Africa, maybe you have handshakes, it can be long ones or finger snaps, respectful bows or whatever, hand on heart. Asia, you have palms together. Europe, you have differences as well. You have the double or triple cheek kiss, firm handshakes, casual hugs in Americas, or firm handshake as well. And then in Latin America, you usually have warmer hugs, cheek kisses. In Oceania, we got the nose-to-nose greeting as well, that you've also got up in the very north, actually. In I think it's in some of the Inuit as well. They have that type of thing. Handshakes are also more common there. So we can see the handshakes is something that's very common as well. Yeah. But if we think about the world, and then we come into the continents, and then we go into one continent. If we just zoom in on one continent, I'm going to take Europe right now because I happen to be in Europe, but that doesn't mean that Europe is better than anything else, just to prove a point in a way. Yeah. So only in one continent, we've got France, Italy, and Spain that tend to kiss on the cheek. Okay. But you have different numbers of kisses. Scandinavia, UK, and Germany, handshakes. Okay, so you can imagine what happens when you have somebody from Spain meeting somebody from Scandinavia and they don't know this difference. Well, the Scandinavian person ends up getting somebody in their personal space, which for them is very uncomfortable, and the Spanish person ends up getting a hand in their stomach. So, it's a bit of a situation there, yeah? And in Eastern Europe, sometimes you have embraces plus kisses, depending on the closer. So what does this really tell us, yeah? That even in a small region, the practices can differ really drastically. So the talk is called Cultural Bridges, or Bridging the Cultural Communication. There is a bridge, you might know this, between Denmark and Sweden. This bridge is a bridge that goes from one country to the other, and it's helped the two countries have a better communication when it comes to transport. However, all bridges aren't always positive in the sense of bridging two countries and making them go further. So we're going to be exploring a little bit the cultural bridges or the breaches. That doesn't mean that this particular bridge here in that country is a breach, but bridges that open, they're going to create a misunderstanding or a breach. So if we play on words a bit, we've got the differences, the cultural bridges and the cultural breaches. So what happens if we have a difference? You have a potential breach or misunderstanding. And if you have a similarity, you have a potential bridge. We all know that when we feel that something is similar to what we know, we're feeling familiar with the situation, we're going to feel a lot calmer. So what is okay and what's not okay in different countries? Some of the aspects that we might run into these similarities or differences are, as we've just seen, the greetings and first impressions, yeah? For example, if you have somebody from a country that is very warm and huggy, meeting somebody from a country that has a sort of a larger personal space where you have to sort of put your hand out, there is a risk of seeming disrespectful or even cold. And this happens a lot. I'm sure you can all think about situations where you've met someone or you've been in a situation maybe in your company or in your school or wherever, and you have people from other countries, and suddenly, the general idea or the general feeling is that, oh, that person is really cold and really distant. Perhaps they're not distant, perhaps they just have a different code. The communication styles in different countries can be very different as well. You have direct styles and indirect. Some of you who've already been to some of my talks, or maybe I've met and we've happened to have the conversation about this topic. I was working at one point for a company that had a base in Barcelona, and then he also had people working in Bolivia, Peru, so in different places in Latin America. And I was, of course, in the Canary Islands. Yeah, I was a middle manager at this point, and we had lots of problems with communication between the central office in Barcelona and the sub offices in Latin America and South America, until I realized that it was a problem that had to do with communication styles. So the people in Barcelona, they had a much more direct communication style. So if they wrote an email, they would go straight to the point and say, okay, we want send it to us by Wednesday. Whereas the people in Bolivia, in Peru, in Mexico, they would send an email with lots of lovely flowery language around it, and then maybe indirectly get to what they wanted. So you can imagine what happens when somebody in the Latin American, South American countries get an email from the big boss in Barcelona, and they feel that, oh, he's so rude, how can he be so rude, just asking things like that without anything else. We're not further anything else at all. So just, really rude. And the people in Barcelona were going, oh my God, these people, they waste my time. I have to really read between the lines here to understand what's going on. Well, I don't know if you can imagine what I did, but having realized this, I ended up translating Spanish into Spanish. And it was really a translation between communication styles. So I ended up translating the emails from Barcelona, flower them up when they were going towards South America and Latin America. And the ones that came from South and Latin America, I would get rid of everything nice and flowery, and I would just go to the point and send it over to Barcelona. So that was a huge problem just because the communication style was different. Yeah. Something else that you can find quite often, and I'm sure you run into this, is time and punctuality. At one point, I was studying in Switzerland, and I mean, like, being Swedish, in Sweden, punctuality is very important. In Spain, not quite as important. Those of you who live in Spain or who have been in Spain, you know that the mañana mañana is a very typical expression. You know, things can happen at some point, but punctuality is not really a very important thing. However, in Switzerland, punctuality is taken to an extreme. So I suddenly found myself being late when I was on time, because there, time really is money, and this culture was seeing being punctual synonymous of being there before the time. So you should be there like 10 minutes before. I mean, obviously, I'm generalizing now, so I'm sure that not every Swiss person in the whole world is that punctual, but the company really expected you to be there 10 minutes before. So, you know, even that can be a real problem. So you can imagine if I, instead of having had the Swedish upbringing as well, I'd only had the more Southern European one, where it's more of an event time culture, where punctuality, yeah, it's important, but not as important. So that was a big problem as well. A bit further on in this, if we have time, I'll tell you a little anecdote that is really quite funny. Tell me, does anybody want to say something? All good?
No, you're good, Patricia.
Okay. Another thing is the power distance. Yeah, we've got a lot of countries that have a hierarchical respect versus other countries that have a more horizontal one. So if you are from a country where there is a really hierarchical respect, where you would naturally respect somebody who is a higher rank than you, then obviously if you meet another country and you have a situation that maybe you're doing an event together with this other school in another country, or your company is having a negotiation with another country, and the two have a different power distance, as you can see, you know, that would probably create a problem, because the hierarchical structure would not understand why the flat structure never gets to doing something. I mean, like in the hierarchical one, the one that has a higher rank just tells the others what to do quite often. Whereas in the flat structure, quite often you have a group getting together, team meeting, you discuss it, you sort of, talk about what is the best way, you listen to everybody, and that would take a lot longer. So that's another thing that can create a lot of cultural problem. And then we come into my favorite one, which is the non-verbal communication. Does anybody want to say something? I can hear some communication. We're all good? Yeah?
Good,
Okay.
Patricia.
Right. So the non-verbal communication might be one of the things that we least consider, because we quite often consider, as we could see earlier in the chat, how do we greet? A lot of people went into the language, yeah? Hello, namaste, I don't know, some different things, ways of greeting people linguistically. And then we had some with the non-verbal and with the physical ones, yeah? But there's three that really do get overlooked quite often, and they create a lot of cultural problems when you have communication between different countries. For example, eye contact. Consider for a minute what your stance on eye contact is. In your country, would it be respectful to look somebody in the eye when you're talking to them, or would it be disrespectful? Just consider it for a moment. You don't have to write anything. If you feel like writing something, you can, obviously. Feel free to use the chat. Your personal space. The personal space is how close you are comfortable having people in your space. So, for example, people who kiss each other when they greet, they usually have a very small personal space. Whereas people who maybe just nod their head or have a handshake, and the further away your hand is from your body when you have a handshake, the bigger your personal space. Yeah. And then one of my absolute favorites is the use of silence. If I was to be silent here now for maybe a minute, some of you would be perfectly fine. Some of you would think, is my camera working? Is my mic working? The technology working? And some of you will start to get really, really, really uneasy and very edgy, because silence is a very culturally specific thing. Some cultures really welcome silence, and you can have people in business meetings, for example, have quite long silences, and that's seen as something positive. Whereas in some other cultures, if silence is too long, people get anxious. People get extremely edgy, and they would think it's the other person not really having anything to say, and they would be probably considered boring. So just have a little think for a second and think about what happens in your country when it comes to eye contact, personal space, and use of silence. And how could that potentially be a problem for communication? Okay, let's explore a bit. As you know, a lot of things, especially misunderstandings and different ways of seeing things, and we know this a lot, especially in global schools when it comes to the SDGs. The SDGs can definitely be seen in different ways in different countries and in different cultures. So it does have to do with perspectives, and I'm sure you've all seen this picture. This is a great visual where you can see how two perspectives are right. So even if you have a different perspective of something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong. I'm sure some of you remember that, some time ago, I can't remember if it was some years ago, there were these things on social media where there was a dress that some people saw it in one color and some people saw it in a different color. And it sort of ended up being quite heated discussions about this. And some people felt that the others were stupid for not seeing the right color, and the others were thinking that the others were stupid. So you can imagine these two people here, yeah, arguing about whether it's a 9 or a 6. Of course, for the guy on the person on my, in this case, right, it is a 9. There's no question about it. Can't you see it's a 9? But for the one on the left, it is a 6. And there's no argument about it. It's definitely a 6. So these two here, they could probably be arguing about this for a long time, unless one of them decided to walk to the other side of the number and realize that actually, from the other person's perspective, it is actually a 6 or a 9. There's a lovely little story about some birds. I'll just tell you very quickly if you don't know this story. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but basically you have a bird at the top of a tree and a bird at the bottom of the tree. And it's one of these trees where the top side of the leaf is very green and the bottom side of the leaf is quite white. So they sit there and they're basically argue. So to make the long story short, they sit there and argue whether it's green or white until one of them flies to the other person's place and then realizes that, actually, from your perspective, it's another color. Kendra, are we doing okay?
Oh, we're doing great, Patricia. I do
Good.
see, Patrick, I'm wondering, I think somebody accidentally annotated on the slides. So we see a line on our slide. So I'm just wondering if you stop share and reshare, maybe that line will go away. And just asking everybody not to draw on the slides.
Okay.
But otherwise, we're doing great. Thanks.
I'll try and share again. Hello, everyone. I hope you're still alive and kicking.
We do have a lot of great comments responding to your different questions in the chat. So it seems like everyone is really engaged. So thanks, Patrick.
Excellent, excellent. That's what we want to see. Oh, I like that one. Between your 6 and my 9, what's the difference? Is it a 3? Well, that's a good perspective, no? All right. So can you see what I'm sharing again?
Yep, you're perfect.
Are we good now? Yeah. Okay, so those of you who know me, you also know that another one of my little pet peeves is the brain. Neuroscience is definitely something I really enjoy. I'm not going to go into details today on it, but I do hope that we'll get another opportunity to explore aspects of that. But our brain is a great thing that we've got here, no? It helps us think and all these things, but it also does other things. It tells us stories, and those stories are very far from reality at times. So you can see that if you have a different perspective and your brain is telling you that you are right, and the other person has another perspective and they're seeing it as well from their reality, then, if each brain is telling everybody that they are, right, and they're not, then we need to reassess that a bit. It also interprets that reality based on the experience that you've had. So, for example, if you've never seen a 6 or a 9 in your life, you probably wouldn't have that problem. You would just go, huh, interesting, what's this symbol? And you'd explore it and you say, oh, from this side it sort of goes this way, and from this side it goes this way. However, your experience has told you that it's a 6 or a 9. And your experience tells you as well how you're supposed to behave. So, good behavior, good education is very much based on the story of your life and your experience. Yeah. The other funny thing that the brain does is that if it doesn't know something, it will fill the gap. I'm sure you've seen those texts where there's like letters that aren't there, and you can still read the words. If you haven't seen them, there's tons of them around on the internet. But it's basically like a text, and then some of the letters have been taken away, but you can still read it. Okay, so you can see that the brain is going to take the experience that we have of reality, and it's going to fill the gaps. So if we see something that we don't know, then our brain is going to fill the gap. And this is what happens quite often if we don't stop and pause a little bit and see what's really going on. So this is something that I'm sure those of you who might, hopefully not, but I'm pretty sure that in this rather large group, there's bound to be somebody who's experienced some kind of negative attitudes from people. And quite often those people, I'm not at all, saying it's okay at all, but quite often those people probably think that they are in the right because their brain is filling the gap on something that they don't know about. So we have this brain, wonderful machine, but it does tell us stories. It interprets reality based on our experience, and it does fill gaps that we don't know about. I don't know if you know David Rock. David Rock is the founder of the Neuro Leadership Institute. Great, interesting guy. It's lots of interesting things. And one thing that I really, really like in what he does, and this is now it's not a recent model, but it's still very important for what we're talking about. It's the SCARF model. This SCARF model is a brain-based model of human social experience. So I just want you for a second here to have a look at these 5 columns. Yeah. So you've got status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And basically, to not go into neuroscience and get too tangled up into terminology here, okay, these are the domains that we feel are either threatening or helpful. As you might know, our brain has basically one thing only to do, and it's very primitive in this, and that is to keep you alive. So everything that happens around you, the brain's going to be going, is it a threat, or is it something that's going to help me keep alive? So it sort of keeps judging everything that goes on. So if you think about status, status, your brain is going to be thinking, what's my importance in relation to the others, and what's the importance of the others in relation to you? So the perception of a potential or real reduction in status can generate a strong threat response. And also, I'm sure you found this as well in people around you, that suddenly when they maybe get a promotion, they suddenly think that they are above you and they are now a better human being. Obviously not, but that's the perception. Certainty is the ability to predict the future. Of course, we can't predict the future, but the brain is constantly trying to predict what's going to be going on. As you could tell before, it fills the gap. Yeah. So if we don't know what's going to go on, it's going to generate a threat response as well. Yeah. So you can imagine if you're going to go and meet someone from a different country and you don't really know how that person is going to be behaving or how that person expects you to behave, you're going to get a bit nervous. So that could create some anxiety in you as well. Yeah. So you can see how the brain is moving towards or away from this prompt. The autonomy is the perception of having control over your environment. So if you think or you feel that you don't have a choice, then you're going to get stressed unless that choice is something you really want. So, for example, if somebody comes up to you and says, I'm going to give you $3 million and you don't have a choice, I'm pretty sure you're all going to be very happy. So that's not the problem. However, if somebody says, okay, we're going to be reducing people in this company, and I'm afraid you're going to be kicked out. You're going to be made redundant. You don't have a choice, and it's going to make you very stressed. So you feel that you really have no control over this. When it comes to communication, we can feel this as well, because obviously if you have somebody who knows a language that you don't know, you might feel that you don't have the same choice and that you don't have a choice in how to communicate with that person. So that can create stress. Anybody who's learned a language can probably relate to this, not having a choice and not really knowing how to go forward. Then we come to one that is very, very important for this topic, which is relatedness. Yeah. All of you, when you're with people that you like, people who are friends, people who are, you feel very comfortable with, you get the feeling of security in relation to these people. Yeah. So your brain is basically also trying to decide whether somebody who's coming towards you is a friend or a foe, a friend or an enemy. So you can imagine what happens when you have a cultural misunderstanding. Somebody who does not look you in the eye when you expect them to look in the eye would give the wrong impression to you. And that would probably influence your feeling of relatedness with that person. Similarly, if somebody goes into your personal space, you would feel really threatened. So that, again, it would probably not be very, very comfortable for you. So the sense of belonging to a group is important, yeah? Collaborating and hearing information is very closely tied to these perceived levels of trust. If you hear some news, for example, or you hear something from someone, depending on who that person is, you're going to give it more or less importance. This is one of the big problems with social media, really, with communication on social media, because there we're stripping the information of everything related to culture, nonverbals, and we really don't know if it is a trusted source or not. So you can see how that ties in as well with the culture issue. And finally, we have fairness, the transparency and clear expectations. Okay. So any unfair exchange can generate a strong threat. Yeah? So greater transparency, communication, and participation can have a positive impact. But of course, if your communication and transparency and participation doesn't use the same cultural code, then quite often that could generate a problem as well. So, do you think any of these could get triggered if we misunderstand cultural differences? Just take a couple of seconds to think about it. If you want to share in the chat, please do. You might want to share which one you think is the most important one that you think could be triggered. So think about yourself in a situation with another culture. How have you felt? Did you feel threatened or did you feel secure because of any of these aspects? So I'll just give you a couple of seconds for that. Do share in the chat if you fancy, just which one you think, or if all of them are important in your opinion.
We have a couple yes, it can be triggered, all are important.
Okay.
They can all be triggered, not being certain and sensing a feeling of unfairness or being judged will be a huge hindrance to communication, all of them. I think status and autonomy are especially sensitive and can trigger a big issue. I feel insecure. I don't want to offend or be misunderstood. relatedness, especially when known people grow differently and have the same expectations. All are equally important as per the situation.
Perfect. Well, as you can see, these also are very culture specific and country specific. So in some countries, you might feel that status is more important, whereas in others it could be autonomy, and in others it can be certainty or relatedness or fairness. And in fact, it's also age specific. Some of these will be more important depending on the age that you have as well. But having this little model in mind really does help improve communication in any setting, whether it's in the same cultural setting or if it's with some other countries. So I'm going to move on. Okay. So here are 3 stories about cultural clashes. Okay. So, for example, the first one we already talked about, that you can have a tension because of the different kisses. Okay. The silence misinterpretation is another one. So these are just examples of stories that have happened, real stories that have happened, where some of the aspects that we talked about before have happened. Okay, so we have the late meeting, the silence in misinterpretation, and the cheek kiss mix up. Within global change making and projects with other countries, one of the things that, for those of you who work maybe in IB schools or have a situation where you work in charities that work across countries, there's a great story that I was told once when I was trained as a CAS coordinator for an IB school, where this group of children, of students, they were really excited because they were going to go to this small village. I think, if I'm not wrong, it was somewhere in South America. And they were going to make houses for the people there because they didn't have any houses. They had huts, and they were like, woo, they didn't have proper houses. So they spent a lot of time and effort, and they, did fundraising and everything, and they made these amazing houses for them. And then a year later, when they came back, they found that the people weren't living in the new houses. So they were really confused, and they were thinking, how ungrateful of these people not to be living in these amazing houses that we have created for them, Like, oh, we went through all this effort, and we made through, we went through all this, and we made this fundraising, and we put so much money and work and time into this, and these people, they're not living in their houses. How ungrateful is that? Can somebody just quickly say in the chat what they think really happened here? And we can just have one or two. If Kendra, if you're happy to share one or two.
Yep. I see upset, tension. If anybody wants to share in the chat why. Okay, so often people try to help but don't understand what others really need or want.
Thank you. Exactly. So how could this situation have been not have been incurred in a misunderstanding?
So somebody
Well,
in the chat says consultation before the intervention.
absolutely. So this is exactly what they learned the hard way. When they spoke to the community and they said to the most respected elder there, why aren't you living in the houses that we took so much effort in building and everything? And they said, well, we are really grateful for the houses. However, first of all, the climate we have here isn't really very suited to that type of house because they get very, very hot. So even though they're wonderful houses, our little huts are actually cooler and they are more suited to our environment. And then they said, what we really, really, really would have wanted is a statue of the Virgin that we really like, the patron saint that we really look up to here. Yeah. So they wanted a religious statue, and that's what would have made them really happy. Now it's as easy as this: if the people who were working with this community had taken some time to just ask what they wanted, then perhaps we would have had a better communication between them. So here again, something that for one culture was very important, housing and proper housing at that, for the other community wasn't really that important. It was their religious faith and having their statue that was most important. So misunderstandings are rarely about bad intentions, yeah? But they are about different cultural codes. So we need to try and navigate these cultural codes. So let me introduce you, I think we're okay for time, to a little framework that I've made from the letters in Bridge, because since I've been starting to work with cultural differences and things, and in fact, I've been doing this all my life, it's just that now I'm putting things down on paper a bit more. I realized that actually the word bridge can really help us to navigate these situations. So I'm going to share a little framework with you, if that's okay. And because it's also the acronym for bridge, it's an easy to remember one as well. So the first one, B, be curious. R, respect differences. I, inquire gently. D, don't judge. G, give space. E, engage and reflect. And that spells out bridge. So let's just have a little look at them one at a time. So what does it mean to be curious? Well, for those of you who might already be practicing mindfulness or anything really that makes you sort of pause in the present a little bit and really be present, you know, that's something that's very recommended, is to have a beginner's mind and to rediscover with curiosity and amazement. If we think about little children, when they explore the world, everything is amazing. Some things can be scary, but it's amazing. And usually curiosity goes further than the fear they have. Yeah. So they'll be exploring things. Yeah. So let's be curious when we're talking to people as well from different cultures. Ask, observe, and learn before you assume that you're right and the other person is wrong. Yeah. So that's the first one. That's B. Respect the differences. This is a really complicated one because, of course, if you don't agree with those differences, it might be very different. It might be difficult for you to respect them. Yeah. And we know this from some of the SDGs that in some countries and in some areas are really quite complicated to deal with, and human rights as well. Some human rights in some areas are not being respected because they feel that the differences are too big. Yeah. But what we can do is we can acknowledge that what feels normal to me might not be normal for somebody else. So if we flip the coin a bit, a really good activity that you can do either with your children, in your students in class, or with your co-workers, or with yourself, with your families, is what aspects of your culture would seem strange to somebody else. Me being Swedish, I can tell you there's a lot of stuff in the Swedish culture that could definitely seem strange to someone else. But definitely, I remember growing up, and my mom, she made such a great effort in keeping Swedish culture and events alive for me when I was growing up. And one of them, as some of you might know, is Midsummer. Yeah, the Midsummer party in Sweden is very important. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the scary movie. People don't usually get killed in Midsummer. It's usually a very positive and happy and family related festivity. But you do dance around something that in Sweden is called midsommarstång, and that you would probably call a maypole in English more than anything else. And it's basically a cross with two rings on. Now you can imagine what the gardeners in the community where I grew up, in a Catholic country, thought about my mom putting up a cross full of flowers with two circles on. And then at that, dancing around it. You can imagine that the sniggers around, the local population was, these people are a bit weird, no? They do strange things, it's probably a sect. It's probably something, weird going on there. Yeah. Until they realized that it wasn't actually anything weird going on at all. It was just a very normal cultural festivity that came from Sweden. So yes, we have a lot. In fact, if we had like some hours. We could go into a lot of differences that would seem strange to someone else. Another activity is the alien. If an alien was to pop down into your house or into your community and had no idea what was going on, how would you explain things to that alien? So those are a couple of activities that just helps you see how what feels normal to you might actually not be very normal for other people. Yeah. Festivities is one of them that we can go into far and wide. So respect differences doesn't mean that you agree with them, but we can acknowledge that, your normal might be different from somebody else's normal. Inquire gently. If you're unsure about something, just ask respectfully, If you're going over to Japan, for example, for a holiday, or you're going from Japan to the UK or wherever you're going, okay, why don't you ask, how do people usually greet here? And now that we've got, all this chat GPT and everything, it's really easy to ask, how do people greet? How do people behave in this country? What do they expect you to do if you're a foreigner in this country? Yeah. So we can do some research, yeah. What is important for people in the target culture, country, or community? And this would have to be tailored to what you're going to be doing there. If you're going to go and work, for example, at a school, your idea. I remember a colleague who went to work in China. I remember he ran into a huge problem when he was going through, he was an English teacher and he was going to the typical, primary things on farms. Of course, the farm that he was used to wasn't the same farm in China. So it was a bit of a cultural shock there for him. And he had to realize that, oops, maybe if I'd asked what a farm is like, this was before ChatGPT, so he could have asked, then maybe I could have tailored my lesson better to the students. This is one of my favorites, but in all settings, not just in communication and in cross-cultural communication, just in anything, yeah? Don't judge. You've probably gathered that I am a mindfulness practitioner, so that's another one, a big one in mindfulness. Don't judge what's going on. It's what's different doesn't necessarily have to be wrong. So don't judge and practice empathy. This comes back to our perspectives, yeah? Maybe we could just have that little curiosity and say, what if there are other ways of seeing this, yeah? Or what can I learn from this situation rather than? It's like quite often you've got people who, when people behave in a way that you find very, very rude or very abrupt, I quite often see this as little icebergs, yeah? So what I'm seeing is the top of the iceberg. And then what I think is, I wonder what's going on underneath that iceberg. And that helps me have a lot more compassion for that person who initially could have really irritated me. So not judging is really a good hint, especially when you're communicating across cultures. Give space. So maybe we can allow some flexibility in the communication styles, in the timing and in the expectations, yeah? Okay. How would you like others to behave towards you if you are extremely punctual and you're in a country where people aren't punctual? How could you sort of navigate this, yeah? Could we get to a middle of the road? Could you maybe tell the other person that, you would really appreciate if punctuality was being respected? Or maybe you need to just consider how important is letting go of this or keeping my way of doing things. So if I really think it's important that you do not give me 2 kisses when you greet me, and I really want you to have a handshake, maybe I need to communicate that. However, if, I'm not really too bothered and I don't mind people giving me a kiss maybe or giving me a hug, then maybe I can, ease down on my expectations as well. So I can give a bit of space, I can allow a little bit of flexibility in the communication styles. I can have, again, some empathy towards the fact that there are other ways of doing things. And here in the give space, a good reflection is to think, well, what would I like others to do with my things, the things that I feel are really important? Why do I want the others then to let go of theirs? Yeah. Finally, we have engage, and then we can add on reflect, because reflection is always good. Yeah. So we come to the end of the bridge. After the interactions, reflect on what worked and what didn't. This is always something that's good. In fact, obviously, being IB student and teacher, reflection is obviously very, very important. And I find that whatever you do, if you don't reflect on it, it sort of disappears. So it's a good idea to always reflect on, how did that go? How was that situation? Did the communication work? And then see how it worked, how it didn't work, and then maybe adapt it. Yeah. Consider, to what extent did you actually reach the outcome that you were looking for? Now, those of you who are in global schools and who are in the alumni community, you know that we have a community, and in that community, we have, I think, between 350 and 400 people, all from different places in the world. So you can imagine that moderating and sort of managing the community has its ups and downs when it comes to communication. So this is something that's very important to sort of, keep track of, and seeing, like, such and such said something. Maybe I'll have a little private word with that person, just to say, be careful, because we have people from this other country where that could be really rude or whatever. So we need to sort of engage with the situation, but at the same time we also need to reflect on what is being successful, and then maybe not lose track of what's the goal of this. Yeah. If what we're trying to do with our communication is to reach an understanding to be able to carry out the project together for the good of others, then maybe some of our own cultural beliefs aren't that important for the greater good. Or maybe if we're going to be doing on Monday, for example, I'm going to be having a little session with a group of school children in, I think it's in Senegal. I'm not quite sure, but so obviously I have to read up on, what is appropriate and what's not appropriate to be discussing in that lesson, because otherwise it doesn't matter how much I feel that whatever I want to say is important. I also have to sort of adapt it to that environment as well. And then if I want to really fight my cause and think that, some of the things that I might not be able to discuss are important, I really don't think that a class of, a primary class is going to be where I'm going to be, you know, fighting my cause. So there, it's easy for me to adapt and to go with the local cultural norms and respect what they want to be done there. So, an easy to remember acronym for creating cultural bridges, not British, bridges: be curious, respect differences, inquire gently, don't judge, give space, and engage and reflect. So, now it's your turn to just quickly give us a little number where 1 is not at all and 10 is very much so. How useful do you think this topic of cultural communication and awareness is for you in your setting, in your job, in your community, in global schools, and whatever? So please share that in the chat if that's okay. Kendra, I still can't see the chat until there's a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back to you all. So if you could just maybe be my eyes and ears there for a minute.
Of course, I see lots of 10s, some 8s and 9s, all quite high scores.
Yeah, I think it is a really important topic. And the funny thing is that cultural communication and awareness is even important in your own community and in your own culture, because you can find people who actually interpret the culture in your own community in different ways. And that's why we end up having such extreme beliefs sometimes, no, within the same culture. So another one I need is, how useful did you find this session? Because that communication really helps me to reflect on whether I need to adapt the way I'm doing talks like this for you to find it useful or not. So if you could kindly as well, 1 is not at all, 10 is very much so, and you please be, completely sincere. I am inviting you to be sincere. As my Swedish DNA, I am happy with a very horizontal communication. I don't need a hierarchical one. And I feel very happy if you could tell me how useful you found this session. So again, Kendra, if you don't mind.
Of course. I'm seeing scores between 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm glad you found it useful. Here are some of the resources. Oh, you can't see them here. Anyway, if anybody wants to dive into David Rock's scarf model, if you just have, just search this David Rock's scarf model, you'll find lots of information about it. So that's not a problem. Or you can just reach out to me either at Global Schools for my normal Global Schools address for those of you who are alumni, or this is my personal address, patribex@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out and ask me if you want anything else about culture, if you want me to help you out with a workshop or whatever. I'm very happy to help you with that. So thank you very much. And I shall come back to the community in case you have any questions.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Patricia. I see one of our senior mentors, Oyagoga, wrote a really kind comment. Thanks indeed, Patricia, for helping us discover how to nurture cultural intelligence. It keeps getting pushed down so many comments. For helping us discover how to nurture cultural intelligences and fostering effective communication in a global setting. It will be really good if you could organize a workshop for deeper dive into the Bridge framework. So maybe we can look into that for a future professional development session. But just really want to echo everybody. So many thank yous in the chat. We do have a few more minutes, so we're going to turn to question and answer. If you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat. I did make note of one question that came a bit earlier. But you know what? I think you answered that question throughout your presentation. Early on in the presentation, somebody put in the chat, how can you adapt your communication style working from different cultural backgrounds? But I think you have completely done that throughout this session. So if anybody else has any questions, maybe you can either raise your hand if you would like to ask it verbally, or please do feel free to put it in the chat.
Or if you just want to share something that has to do with this topic, that's fine as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Does anybody have a question? What if people aren't willing to communicate? Okay, so yeah, that is a really good question. If people aren't willing to communicate, it would depend on the setting, of course, because it depends on how important it is for you to have this communication. Sometimes, as I can't remember who said, but some battles are better not fought. Yeah. So depending on the situation, if it's like a communication with somebody and it's not really vital, and that person really does not want to communicate with you, you might need a mediator if you want to continue that communication to bridge that gap. But I found that quite often, if you go from a stance of curiosity, most people won't take communication as a threatening situation. So if you start off actually being curious about the other person, sometimes that will help bridge that. But it would depend on the situation. So if you want to reach out to my email or whatever and ask me about the specific situation, then please do. Michael, I think you've got your hand up. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Hi. Thank you so much, Patricia. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Michael. I'm teaching here in China. I just wanted to ask you, you drew such a perfect analogy when it comes to the 6 and the 9, and you said something, until somebody decides, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to try to see what they see, nothing really gets done and nothing really moves forward. However, if I was the person, I'm the person who always wants to be I'm kind of usually the first person to go, okay, let me see how you're seeing it. But from that person's perspectives, like if I go over there and I see how you're seeing this number, how do I now try to get the other person to go walk back the other way and see it from my perspective? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, I would go into my coaching mode, okay? And I would say, may I invite you to come over to this side, and have a look at it from this side. So maybe that could help. But yeah, you're right. Quite sometimes it depends on how fixed that person's ideas are, but since you have made the effort to come over to their side, what I found is that sometimes you might not get the big, huge change, but you might say, okay, I just want you to have a look at this. You don't have to change the way that you're thinking. I just want you to have a look at this from my side. Okay. I don't really, I don't want to change you. I don't want to change your views or have anything. This is something that happens to me when in this very taboo subject of religion. Yeah. Sometimes you have different people who come around and they knock on your door and they want to tell you about their religion, which is great. I really respect all religions. I really do. And I don't judge them. But quite often I start off the conversation with saying, I'm really happy to hear your view on it. Now, chances are I won't change my point of view. So I'd be the one not really walking to the other side. Yeah. However, I would tell them, I was like, but I'm happy to walk with you and see what you're telling me, So maybe you could invite the other person as well to do that. Like, not really threatening that person to have to change their point of view, because people don't like change. They really don't. So, inviting people to just having a look with a curiosity, it's like, how interesting that you see it this way. Do you know what? I see it this other way. Do you want to come over here and have a look? Something like that, so you sort of invite them over in that way. That could help. But again, it would depend on the situation, of course, and what the aspect is. Yeah. But yeah, I would go for something like that. I hope that helps. Okay.
Okay, Patricia, we have another question. I think it was from Mariko. What would be an appropriate response when we are the ones being judged?
An appropriate response. Okay. Right. That is a huge question and a huge topic. Okay. As we said very, very briefly in the SCARF model, yeah, our brain is constantly judging. So it's very difficult to be non-judgmental. When we feel that we are being judged, again, it depends on context, it depends on the situation, but I would go through a little checklist in my head in saying, okay, is this person's point of view or opinion really important to me? First of all, is that somebody whose opinion of me is important? Is it going to have like some kind of repercussion in my life? Then maybe I would go on to the next stage. If it's not the case, then maybe I just wouldn't bother and just say, okay, fine, let's agree to disagree. Okay. However, if it's something that is really important to me and I'm feeling judged, and this is something that's really, getting to me, and I need to get it sorted out, if I can't communicate with the other person and try and get them to see how I'm feeling, and here a mediation strategy would probably be quite useful, where you would go into the I statements, saying, I feel in this way when you say this, or I feel in this way when you do this. Yeah. So you're not actually saying that the other person is doing something wrong. What you're saying is that this has an effect on you that you don't like. And that, if could you kindly, not do that, because this makes me feel really bad. Obviously, this, if the person you're having this situation with is a family member, or maybe your partner, or a boss or something like that, somebody in a hierarchy, for example, then the situations would be more complicated. But again, it is a huge subject. But I would first of all think, is it something that I really need to sort out, or can I just leave that person have their opinion, because I don't really care about their opinion? Okay. This is something that you have to do a lot on social media, for example. You get the people, I mean, luckily I haven't had that many situations like that, but I know people who have had haters and all these things, and you really do have to sort of think, okay, do I really care what this person somewhere in their living room having a really boring life thinks? No. Okay. So I'm not going to bother with that. Yeah. But if it's somebody that I really care for, and that's important for me, what they are thinking about me, and maybe they're giving me a hint as well about something that I'm not aware of. As you might be aware, we've got like the little matrix. That might be another PD session, Kendra. The matrix of like what you think you're projecting to the world, how others see you. And then you have this little blind spot, yeah, where you haven't got a clue, you know, and you might think that you're doing things in one way, and the other people are actually communicating, or like I feeling that you're communicating something else. Like some people, for example, when they're like in a thoughtful moment, they might look really stern, you know, and you get the impression that they might be angry, or they might be, you know, like very aloof or whatever, and you'll be going, "Are you okay?" And they'll be going, "Yeah, why? What's wrong? You know, I'm fine." And it's just their way of looking. So for me, for example, I had a real eye opener. You need to work on yourself a bit. You need to have a lot of self-awareness and work on yourself. I used to be extremely reactive. Okay, I was reactivity on legs. So you know, somebody would like, you know, touch me on a day, and I would jump. I would eat people, basically. All right. So I was a really, really reactive person. That isn't a good way to be. And the way I realized that I was the one who was actually reactive and that I was the one in the wrong was because somebody actually said, "Look, I can't deal with you when you're like this." And I was going, "This person is like, you know, what a rude person, no? I'm perfect the way I am. For God's sake, you know, how can anyone think that I everything I do it with heart?" And it's true, I do. But at that point in my life, I might not have been very good at communicating it in a good way. So the incident made me have a very good look at myself and start working on my emotional intelligence and on my emotional management, and how I, you know, was I really walking the talk when it came to me trying to, my intention might have been really good, yeah, the same as with a cultural situation as well, yeah, but maybe I wasn't really as open to listening to how that was being, you know, taken by the other person. So yes, this person and myself, we actually had a parallel situation, because she was driving me up the wall and I was driving her up the wall, and we both thought that the other person was doing the wrong thing. So I think for both of us, it was an eye opener. When we had this conversation, finally, it was like, you know, really? Gosh, but I'm the one in therapy because of you. And she'd be going, no, I'm the one in therapy because of you. And we both sort of like, how did we end up in this situation, you know? And it all you know, boils down to really to communication. And then that's when I started really, I mean, this is now quite some time ago, but I started to really have a look at myself and start to get to know myself and start to realize that, okay, no, it's not okay always to, you know, let your emotions rush off with you. And that's when I started as well practicing mindfulness, and I really got into emotional intelligence, and it was such an eye opener. In fact, there was some really interesting questionnaires in the course I did, where you could send it out to people and they could, you know, give you replies. Of course, you have to be open for those replies, but that was great. That was such a great activity, because um you know, you'd get they suggest that you send it out to people that you actually don't get on with, because if you send it out to your friends, they might just say, "Yeah, no, everything is fine." It's like when you go and try clothes on with your best friend, and everything looks really great on you, and you get home and you see yourself in the mirror, and it's like, "Oh dear, shouldn't have bought that." And then maybe somebody who's a little bit more honest would say, you know, "Look, no, that doesn't suit you at all." Yeah. So sometimes we need to have those conversations when those who don't get on with, and in fact, that is a really good activity. Ask those that you don't get on with, why is it you don't get on with me? What is it you don't like about me? Because they might be more honest than your friends. So I don't know if I answered your question, but you know.
I think you did, Patricia. That was a great response. And I think you've actually answered a couple of the other questions in the chat based on that.
Okay.
We are running out of time, so I'm going to pose two very similar questions, and then maybe you can kind of address them both. And I think this is a great way to leave us. So, Sine, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, is what kind of steps to take to bring building cultural awareness, maybe within your community. And Manny mentions how can we be able to develop a shared environment in our school setting. So maybe what steps can we take to promote cultural, building this cultural bridge within our school communities?
Great question as well. I would start with the activity that we had as an idea in the bridge framework, where you start off actually having a look at what would other people think about your culture. So you could start off with, like, having a look at your own culture. It's never a good idea to go into stereotypes and things about other people, because that's always going to be threatening. However, if you go into your own and you sort of think, okay, now let's look at, as a classroom or as a school or whatever, let's have a look at where is our school, where is our class, where is our company. It can be, catered for in different situations. Yeah. What would somebody who comes from a different culture, a different country, a different setting think about what we are doing? And that sort of gives you that distance from what you're doing, because we quite often don't see what we're doing as something strange because we're used to it. Yeah. Okay. You go up to the north of Sweden, people eat flipping surströmming, which is fermented herring. Most people would be like, how can you eat that? And in other places in the world, you eat stuff as well that, other people will find really odd. So, maybe we could start off having, a look at our culture as if we were aliens. Yeah. Yeah, popped off a planet. We come into this community and then look at it with like new eyes, beginner's eyes. You don't know anything about it, and then explore the world around you first of all. So I think that could be a good activity to start off with, and then opening up cultural conversations. If it's an international school, for example, or an international company, it is vital to have these conversations, because misunderstandings quite often are due to cultural misunderstandings. So we have different cultural codes. You could even start talking about the cultural language in a way that, oh, well, the cultural code, as in the cultural language of this place, this is acceptable, but not here. So you might have, if you have, for example, I recently worked in a British school, and the British school is here in Spain. And the people who work there, a lot of them are either British teachers who've come over from the UK, or expats, or people who are from different nationalities and ended up here, like myself, or Spanish people. So you can imagine that sometimes, you had really interesting situations where, if anybody has been in a company with, in Britain, for example, quite often, emotional intelligence is something very important, and you do not show emotions quite often. Yeah. So, you need to sort of keep your calm. You need to, talk about things in a certain way, and you might not be entirely honest to the face of people. That doesn't mean that people aren't honest. Don't get me wrong. It's a way of, like, communicating. Whereas Southern European people tend to be much more temperamental, more passionate, more emotional. Yeah. So maybe you're coming and going, there's a big problem down the hall. Wow, what are we going to do about it? And the other person from the other from the more Northern European will see, like, this person is not very professional, barging in like that about this, and you're going, there's a do something about it. And I'll be going, no, you first have to go and speak to such and such, and then go to speak to such, and then you have to fill in this form, and then whatever. So, cultural awareness is something that you should bring into your professional development sessions in the company or in the school, and it's definitely something that should be brought into the classroom. So you can just start off with something as easy as seeing, what nationalities you have in your class, what nationalities are the teachers from, what nationalities are your colleagues from, and then start from there, and maybe have a little board where people can put, 2 or 3 easy parameters. I like greetings because they're quite non-threatening. So you can be like, how do people greet in your country? Pluff. So you got that. That's a good opening, because then you can get to know, like, well, if you greet differently, perhaps you think about other things differently too. What is okay to do maybe when we're eating, yeah? Like in some cultures, it's really rude to put your elbows on the table, whereas in other countries, it really doesn't matter at all. So, you know, you could start off like that, maybe having 2 or 3 parameters, non-threatening parameters, and just have people add their information on that. I hope that answers the questions a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patricia. This was a fantastic session. I just want to answer. There was a question about whether we would be getting or sending out these slides and the recording. Definitely, we'll be sending out the recording, Patricia. I'm assuming you have no issue if we also share the slides.
I'll
You can share those
no,
with
I don't have a
me.
problem with the slides. I will no, in the recording that's fine.
Yep.
If anybody wants like any visual or a handout or something, you know, they can contact us, and I'll
Perfect.
make like a more condensed version where you have like a bit of explanations for it, because obviously the slides aren't very except for the bridge one. The bridge ones obviously are very explicit, but the others aren't really very explicit without the communication behind it. So
Yeah, so we will be sending out the recording, and if you wanted the slides or further information, please do contact Patricia, maybe Patri, if you can just put your Global Schools email in the chat right there. Just some final, I announced these at the beginning, but just in case you were late joining us, if you are an advocate in training right now, please make sure that you are wrapped up your training. The edX training technically finished yesterday. However, if you're not finished, please wrap up the training today. If you are doing the WhatsApp training, it finishes tomorrow, and all 3 of your discussion prompts are due tomorrow. And lastly, before this call, we did send out for all of our alumni calls for mentors. So if you are interested in being a mentor, please do submit your mentor application before the August 25th deadline. Perfect. And thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.